Welcome to the AI Chat Podcast. I'm your host, Jaden Schaefer. Today on the podcast, we have the pleasure of being joined by William Falcon, who is the creator of PyTorch Lightning, a deep learning framework. He's also the founder and CEO of Lightning AI and was previously co-founder and CTO of NextGen Vest. He began working on these projects while completing a PhD at NYU, which was funded by Google DeepMind and NSF. Additionally, he worked as a researcher at Facebook AI and at Goldman Sachs. Welcome to the show today, William.
Thanks for having me. Very excited to chat.
Yeah, super happy to have you on the podcast today. A question I wanted to kind of kick this off with is to kind of ask you a little bit about your background. What got you started on this field? You've obviously done a lot of really interesting things in the space. You got a PhD. Is this something you always knew you were interested in, AI and kind of this technology, or is this something that you found as you were going through school, or what was your journey like on that?
Yeah, super random walk. I actually started in the military. So I was doing special operations for a few years, going through SEAL training. And then I got injured. And so the Navy was like, what are you going to do next? And I was like, I don't know. I guess I'm going to figure something else out. So they gave me an option to like become a pilot or like, one of these other jobs. And I was like, not at all. I'm going to pursue this. And so I basically, the Navy discharged me. And then while I was sitting around kind of waiting for my next thing, this was around 2012 when the iPhones were becoming a thing.
Okay.
I started learning to code iPhone apps. And so I got into coding that way. And then many years later, just happened to, like around 2012, 2013, people started caring a lot about how do I get smarter with my software, right? Apps and so on. Mm-hmm. So I started looking into machine learning, and then a few years later discovered deep learning. So I just kind of found my way through there. And then I found that it was pretty useful and kept doing it, I guess. And that was before all the craziness and all the hype. So turns out the tools I built for myself for undergrad and then my PhD at some point became what is PyTorch Lightning today. So it's stuff that I've been working on since 2015, but it became really relevant in 2019 when we were training huge models already at Facebook at that time. And now, fast forward to 2023, and everyone's trying to train large models, and it's stuff that we already were doing in 2019. So it's, I guess, pretty timely.
Very cool. Wow. Yeah, very cool. So, of course, you're the creator of PyTorch Lightning. Can you tell us a little bit about, I guess, explain to the listener what PyTorch Lightning is, what it does, and the problems it's solving for customers?
Yeah, so PyTorch is a framework that is built by Facebook, and it is for developing models, right? So mathematically speaking, it's like computational graphs and all these other things under the hood, right? PyTorch Lightning is a framework that organizes that code and gives you like a framework, right? So I would say PyTorch is more like a library and PyTorch Lightning is more like a framework. So the analogy is like JavaScript and React. So PyTorch is like JavaScript and PyTorch Lightning is like React. Like, could you build Instagram on JavaScript? Sure, but why would you, right? Like you kind of need a framework like React to do something like that because there's a lot of other things that go into it than just the code itself. So PyTorch Lightning solves that, and then our enterprise platform basically is everything else around ML. So how to build and deploy and everything that is not just training, but like everything that how you link it all together with the rest of the kind of ML pipeline. Okay,
very cool. So something else I think I was curious to ask you a little bit about, kind of with your background and some of the things you worked on is, for people listening, what are some strategies that you would suggest for designing AI systems that can handle massive data sets and adapt to evolving AI-driven application requirements?
So we deal with a lot of layers, I guess. So we deal with all the way down to hardware, to apps, to models, to how you do the model. So which layer are you specifically talking about?
I don't know. Just, I guess, if you have any of those layers, if you have any strategies or recommendations for them.
Yeah, so I think probably most people today are concerned with building more AI products, I would say. Like that's like the majority of people, right? It's like the equivalent of like building an iPhone app. So Lightning itself is kind of like the iPhone, and we give you all the tools to do that. So if you're building an iPhone app or an AI app right now, I think the thing that you probably care about, honestly, is like getting to market as quickly as possible. So it's less about how much data you're taking in or this or that. It's like, how can I derive value from my users very quickly? So probably like a ChatGPT API or something like that is super useful, which you can also obviously do through our platform. But I would pretty much just get people not necessarily thinking too much about the models or this or that, is get to the value of what your business is very quickly, regardless of the model. It's a byproduct of that. And then once you have some product market fit there, then go optimize the model. You can do that by fine tuning or pre-training the model, but that will depend on how much data you have. And usually the data that you want to use is data that's unique to your thing. So like if you're a lawyer and you're working on, I don't know, court cases or legal documents, the data set you want to give it is like legal documents to make that model perform better, right? But POCing is very simple. It's it'd be like using Squarespace back in the early 2000s, right? Like get a page up, just get people on it, and then before you go invest into building a full-blown application.
Okay. Yeah, I've got some really good advice. Something I'd be curious about asking you is like, right now running Lightning AI, what are some of the biggest challenges that you're currently working on or trying to solve? What's some of the most difficult things about what you guys are currently building?
I mean, there are challenges that we've had for a long time that I think are more relevant now because more people are using it and using AI in general. But in 2019, we were training what is called an LLM now, right? So we were training large models back then at Facebook. It was mostly vision models, but same analogy, same stuff. And we were using something like 2,000 GPUs at that time. This is 2019, right? For one model. Today, it's like people are like blown away if you can use like 32, 64 GPUs. Like it's very easy for us, right? So I think like a lot of the challenges are around large model training and accessing tons of data, terabytes and all of that. I would say are challenging in general, but these are things that we've solved already for many years, right? So I think what we're doing more now is not just doing that, but how do you do it at enterprises? How do you do it at scale, right? Because it's not just about demos or POCs or any of this. It's actually about how do you build meaningful products, right? And that's a big gap between like what I can see on a chat GPT window versus what I can deploy in a company.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Kind of in that, right, you touched on some of the scalability and security issues. How is Lightning AI kind of ensuring the scalability and security of AI applications?
I mean, so everything we do is for them to, like on the enterprise side, it's on your data, on your VPC, on your own cloud and all that stuff, right? So there's a lot of stuff there, but we partner with other kind of third parties to make sure that like your data is secure, audited, and so on. We have a lot of core auditing capability for the platform as well.
Okay.
At the end of the day, like every enterprise is going to be unique. So we deploy a lot to banks and like highly regulated industries, and those are they take a lot of time to get through. One bank took us probably over a year to just even start.
Oh, wow.
Internally. So, wow. And that's and the things changed so quickly that by the time that we started, the field had completely changed, right? So,
yeah, that's there's definitely a long time in development on some of those more regulated industries. It's really cool that you have worked with banks and other industries like that. I'm wondering, are there other maybe like success stories that you could share where Lightning has kind of made a big impact on a project or an organization?
Yeah, so on the open source, I would say probably the most big companies in the world like use PyTorch Lightning today. So Amazon, they're training massive models, hundreds of billions of parameters. They use PyTorch Lightning to do that. NVIDIA has a whole product line called Nemo that uses PyTorch Lightning. Stable Diffusion, Scalability AI, all those models are trained using PyTorch Lightning. You can talk about Lyft, Uber, like all the biggest companies in the world. If they're doing anything beyond like a little model or a few people working on it, it's very likely using PyTorch Lightning. And it's just a framework that does that. There's a lot of other frameworks and tools that are good for demos and POCs and small models, but Lightning doesn't really have a competitor for like scaling large models, right? And it's been battle tested already for many years before even ChatGPT and LLMs and all this stuff. And so on the platform side, it's really been helping those companies augment more of what they do and do it at scale so that they don't have to deal with all the infrastructure or management themselves, right? Because it's pretty hefty. But yeah, I mean, we've touched pretty much any industry at this point. It's likely like NASA at some point, like everything has touched PyTorch Lightning already. So if you're interacting with any system that uses intelligence, it's very likely that it was somehow like PyTorch Lightning was involved in their training or deploying the thing.
That's super cool. Wow, that's amazing. What are some areas that looking to the future with everything that you guys are building, you're the most excited for? Some advancements that you see everything in this space making?
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone's super excited about trying to get models to train on bigger and bigger machines. We're actually excited about the opposite. Is how do we get ChatGPT performance trained on your laptop?
Okay.
Or like single GPUs or very, very, very small things. So I think that's where we will take the market, not just us, but the rest of the open source community. And that's super important because you need to make this accessible. It's kind of like IBM and Apple, right? Like IBM had these mainframes that only they could operate and it was needed for like big things that they were doing. And then Apple was like, here's a personal computer, like everyone should have access to this. So we kind of think of ourselves as like the Apple of this, where we want to make AI really democratized and have everyone in the world be able to have their own models and run their own stuff without needing to like, pay some giants, some crazy fees just to do that. Like, we imagine if we had to buy, every time you want to use a computer, you have to pay IBM to use it. Like, that's pretty
Yeah, of course. Yeah, of course. That's super cool. So one thing I would love to ask you about, because this was just in the news, I believe like yesterday, the day before, Intel, if you've seen, has just announced that kind of the next big thing for them they want to do is what they're calling AI PCs, where they're like making these chips so that you can like run AI models on your PC. And that's kind of like, it's something that I think a lot of consumers are really excited about. I'd be just curious to hear your perspective on that. I guess some of the ways you're trying to facilitate this, some of the ways they're trying to facilitate this, and I guess your thoughts on it.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. I think that's definitely the way to go. NVIDIA's already done it, right? You can run, you can buy laptops with like 1080 GPUs, probably more advanced GPUs nowadays, 3090s or 3080s or something. So they can run models locally, but these things are massive, right? I think Apple's already doing that. Like we've actually been really heavily involved as well in like all these, like if you ever see on Twitter, they're like, oh, run this model on like a laptop or whatever. Like we've done a lot of that work as well. Cool. And people, like for example, we have Llama models that you can run on your laptop. You can serve them from there today. That's a lot of work on like getting M1 and M2 chips to work really well. But yeah, I think Intel has the capability to do this. They have the Gaudi line as well, so I'm sure they can take some ideas from there and drop them into their laptops. But I think it's a future. It's a matter of time until it's not even for like consumers. Like I think the use case is less like you at home playing with the model, but more like deploying at the edge, like running a model on headphones or on like a hard monitor or something like that. So you can have bigger applications, right?
Very cool. Yeah, of course. That'd be incredibly interesting. I mean, that's not even a prospect I've personally thought about much. Based off of like, I guess some of the advancements you guys are working on and you're seeing, how do you feel like things in the AI space will shift? Like, let's say over the next 5 years, like what are some of the big shifts you think are coming?
Oh man, so hard to predict.
I know.
Last year, this time we were talking. It's funny because like I was at an Intel conference. I was giving a talk at like an Intel panel around July of last year. And they were like, what's the next big thing? And I was like, I think diffusion models are probably going to be a big thing. 2 months later, Stability launches with diffusion models, right? And then like it's 8 months later, ChatGPT. It's like we can't predict it all. Right? So 5 years, I have no clue. I definitely don't think we'll be at AGI. I can tell you that much.
Okay.
And I definitely don't think. I think this whole big model company thing will not be a thing in 5 years. Like I don't think that's going to last. So all these companies that are raising massive amounts of money to train these massive models. Maybe there's a use case for that, but in 5 years, this will be just commoditized, right?
Okay.
There'll be thousands of these, and these will be open source models for the most part. So I think that's the biggest thing. But I don't think I'm saying anything that people don't know. Maybe people still believe that like this is the way to go in the future, but I think in 5 years, it'll be all very, very small personal models that are open source.
Okay. Yeah. It's kind of interesting because I've talked about that a lot on the podcast. That's where I see this going. I believe it was at the beginning of the year almost, Stanford did a thing where they made like a PubMed GPT, right? They trained it on publicly available medical journals. And they're like, yeah, this thing's great at answering like medical questions. If you wanted it to be really good, you train like a very specific model on like heart disease or on breast cancer. And so they're kind of looking at that too, where it's like topic specific, which was a really interesting concept for me to think about. It's like ChatGPT may not be like this overarching giant that just knows everything. There may be more specific models, or maybe they're kind of integrated in different ways. Even the way that ChatGPT's models were leaked, and they have like, I guess they call them like 16 different like experts or like kind of areas within GPT-4 that are helping to facilitate things. So definitely very interesting. I'm wondering, do you have a piece of advice that you would be able to give to people perhaps working in AI today, young professionals that are kind of getting into this field? You have a really awesome background, right? Like you did your PhD, you had Google DeepMind fund it, you did a lot of really cool things in this space. I'm wondering, other people interested in getting into the space right now, what's a piece of advice you could give them?
Don't do a PhD. We all say that. No, you don't need to, right? So I think... No, I think we've made a lot of this stuff super accessible now. I don't mean we like Lightning, but like the community in general, right? So like yeah, with PyTorch Lightning, can you train a model today and not know anything about backprop or, gradient descent or any of this? 100%, you can do that, right? Can you run stuff on the cloud without knowing anything about it? Yeah, you can also do that. So I think there's a world where you don't need to worry about too much of the technical details. So I think people getting into it today should have a business problem they want to solve, like a real, either, I don't know, some side project you want to build, or like a personal thing if you're in school, like an app, or like a startup you want to spin up or whatever. I would focus on that. I would not be turned off by the fact that maybe you don't know how to code, maybe you don't know how to deploy things. It's fine. You don't need to do that. There's plenty of tools out there that can help you do this. But having a clear idea of what to solve for a real set of users is more important than learning how to code, because there's a ton of people that can code, but none of them are like lawyers or medical experts or anything. So the stuff that they're going to try to do is kind of the same. Some model API or some sort of tooling or some sort of like version of the same thing that anyone else can think about, right? So I think those deep experts that should not be scared and go pick up some APIs, go prototype your stuff, and then if that works, then from there, go hire a few developers and start learning, right? And if you're a developer, I think it's still useful to do that, because you want to be product focused and then learn tools as a result. I think one thing that separates me probably from most engineers, I hate engineering, right? I mean, I do it and I do it a lot, but like I use engineering to solve problems. I don't code for the fun of it.
Okay.
I think that's different. A lot of people just code because they're like, that's cool. I'm like, that is cool, but like, it's cooler to see people excited about something you built, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Like, people don't care if ChatGPT is operated by 1,000 monkeys behind the scenes. Like, they don't care, but it's
right.
Right.
Totally. I love that. What's one thing you think that perhaps other AI startups are doing incorrectly today? And I guess a piece of advice or somewhere where you think that people are going in the wrong direction. I mean, I know you mentioned, of course, like ChatGPT and like models being way too big, but are there other areas?
Yeah, I think chasing trends. I think everyone's trying to chase these trends. I think you need to just pause, think about the problem you're trying to solve, and be principled about it. But if you're always chasing the next thing, you're by definition never pushing anything, right? Because everything's always moving. So by the time you start chasing the next thing, that's already gone. Like, you're already a year behind. So I don't know. I saw a very similar thing in the mid 2000, like 2012s area, where it was with iPhone apps, and back then it was the same thing. That 10,000 calculator apps, 20,000 flashlight apps, and it was like, which one's gonna win? It doesn't matter, and we're all commodities, right? So but the stuff that won was stuff that was really well done, that was super thought out and had like a real use case, and those things became multi-billion-dollar companies, right? And there's nothing wrong with putting side projects out there. Just don't conflate a side project with like a business. They're not the same thing usually.
Yeah, okay. I like that. I like that advice. It kind of goes into my follow-up or my follow-on question, which is, what are some areas you think people investing in AI are perhaps missing the mark? You mentioned, of course, sometimes putting money on these big, huge Anthropic, for example. Today just announced they got like $4 billion from AWS. Of course, OpenAI has done $10 billion from Microsoft. What are some areas you think that investors are going wrong, and what's some advice you feel like you could give to people looking at making investments in the AI space?
Yeah, I see a lot of VC money just chasing very silly things, but they were chasing silly things back in early 2000s too, right? So I think it's just about having a fundamental understanding of what this stuff is. I think everyone has like a FOMO, and like they want to understand what's going to be the next thing or not. Like, and there's all these conversations about like who's going to capture the value chain, this or that. It's like, none of us know. Like, if we knew, we'd all be running $100 million hedge funds, right? But we don't. So like, don't try to be too smart. I would say it's like, just be principled, do the diligence, do the work to understand what the field is doing, like what is actually needed, and then find companies that match that, as opposed to getting carried away by like all these pitches of startups, because they're all every single one's gonna make a compelling argument, right, about why something's gonna be good. Some are amazing, 100%. And I do angel investing, so I invest in some cool things. But you have to really know what's going on in AI to be able to make good investments.
Yeah. I love that. That is, I think, very, very important advice right now, especially with kind of some of the froth in the AI market. William, thank you so much for coming on the AI Chat podcast today. Really appreciate your insights, hearing your background and everything. If people want to find out more about some of the things you're working on and some of the solutions over at Lightning AI, what's a good way for them to look that up and find out more about you?
Yeah, so go to lightning.ai and sign up, and then let us know. We'll get you off the wait list. And then follow me on Twitter as well. So Will Falcon and Lightning AI on Twitter as well. And you'll see all our community updates and everything else as well.
All right, sounds good. And I'll drop a link to that in the description or in the show notes for the listeners. William, again, thank you so much for coming on the show. To the listeners, thank you so much for tuning in to the AI Chat podcast. Make sure to rate us wherever you get your podcasts.